Hi friends, and welcome back to First Chapter Friday. This month I am going to tell you a little bit about Spirt Hunters by Ellen O. Again, it is a horror novel. It is geared 3 to 5, which is younger than my usual recommendations. But I'm sure that anyone older could read it because I did, and I was still spooked. For a little backstory for the first chapter, Harper and her younger brother Michael have just moved to a new house, and Michael is excited about his new room and asks Harper to come down the hall to see it. The hallway was even hotter than her room, and Harper cursed their new but ancient house for the millionth time. There was a reason it had been abandoned for over 20 years. It was a wreck. When their parents had decided to relocate to Washington, D.C., they'd brought it because of its gothic charm. Harper still couldn't figure out the charming part. 1 year of renovations and the house was still not ready, and it hadn't kept their parents from moving the whole family down from New York City in the heat of the summer. Michael seemed unaffected by the heat, rushing her down the other end of the corridor. His room was the first they unpacked, so there were no boxes. It was bright and airy with 3 large windows that faced the front. Everything had been neatly organized and arranged by their mother and father. Harper was bummed that 12 was deemed old enough to unpack her own room. The only thing worse than unpacking was packing in the first place. As she stepped in, she couldn't help but notice how much cooler his room was. Puzzled, she sat on the edge of his bed, discomfited by the unnatural chill. "What are you so excited about?" she asked, ignoring the creepy crawling sensation that sent a shiver down her spine. "My new friend Billy," he said, pointing to the corner where his large toy chest sat. Harper gazed at the corner, and the hairs on the back of her neck began bristling. There was a sudden distortion in the air, and her vision blurred. And then, nothing. She gave her brother a quizzical look. "You can't see him?" Michael looked crushed. He turned and stared at the toy chest again, and then nodded. "Billy said you have to be special to see him." "I guess you're not special," he said sadly. His words triggered a sudden memory. Harper was 5 years old, trying to introduce her best friend to her older sister, Kelly. "I'm telling Mom you're making stuff up." "I'm not. She's right there. Why won't you believe me?" There was a loud humming in her ears, and she could feel the beginning of a migraine throbbing in her right temple. She took a deep breath and focused on her brother. But before she could speak, there was a knock on the door, and their mother, Una, appeared. "Michael, you can't leave your toys out in the hallway. Somebody could trip and hurt themselves on them." In her hands, she held a beat-up, old-fashioned red fire truck. It was completely made of metal and looked like an antique. The paint was dull red, chipped, and faded. On the side of the long wagon, it said City Fire Department in gold paint. There were 2 ladders on either side of the truck, with a pulley and a crank to hoist them up, and a little brass bell hanging from the front of its engine. "But that's not Michael stopped short. "Oh, that's Billy's." "Who's Billy?" "He's my best friend," Michael said. "He lives in the house." As a look of puzzled alarm spread over their pretty mother's face, Harper jumped to her feet with an overloud loud laugh. "We were just playing a game," Harper said. "You know, making stories up about people who lived here before. Right, Michael?" Harper turned her back to her mother quickly as she faced Michael. She pressed her finger to her lips, her eyes growing big as she gestured for him to be quiet. Michael laughed. "Harper, you're so funny." Harper grabbed her little brother and swung him onto his bed, tickling him into a fit of giggles. She stole a glance at her mother, noting that her expression had relaxed a bit. "All right, next time be more careful." She placed the truck on the nightstand and walked out. Harper heaved a sigh of relief and collapsed on the bed. Michael climbed on top of her and sat on her stomach. "Why didn't you want me to tell Mommy about Billy?" he asked. A rising nervousness made Harper's stomach clench as she pictured her mother's look of disappointment. "Mom doesn't like things she doesn't understand." "Because she can't see him either?" "Yeah," Harper said. From the corner of her eye, she thought she saw a movement. She looked around the room in confusion. Her head throbbed. "That's okay, as long as I can see him," Michael said. He hopped off the bed. Reaching for his Lego box, Michael dumped all the contents of his carpet and sat down. Onto his carpet and sat down. "Come on, Billy, let's play." Harper was walking over to the door when Michael stopped her. "Hey, Harper, wait. Billy said don't go up into the attic." "Why?" Michael shrugged. "He doesn't want anyone up there." Well, I don't think Mom and Dad plan on touching the attic for a while, Harper said. They're focused on fixing the central air conditioning and everything else that's wrong with this stupid house. The spotty air conditioning was their first priority. While Harper sorted her books onto her shelf, she came upon a small photo album. Her mother had given it to her as a memory book when they were packing to leave New York. Harper had barely glanced through it before, and now she sat on her unmade bed and flipped it open. It was typical of her mother, who was a corporate lawyer and notorious for her meticulousness. There were a few baby pictures with which Harper paged through. She smiled at seeing her 2-year-old self eating spaghetti for the first time, and a photo of her at 4 underneath a T-Rex exhibit at the Museum of Natural History. She was making a scary face at Kelly, her older sister, who stood there looking bored. Seeing those early pictures again, she felt like she was looking at a finished jigsaw puzzle that had one obvious missing piece. No matter how you stared at it, you couldn't help but be aware of the gaping hole in the middle. The trouble was, Harper couldn't put her finger on what was missing. And that wasn't all. Nothing had been the same since the accident. She just didn't feel like herself anymore. Harper turned the pages, trying to ignore her aching head. The more she thought about it, about her missing memories, the worse she felt. All she knew the facts as her parents had relayed them to her. Last fall, there was a terrible fire at the school. She was hospitalized and had a terrible accident, and she had no recollection of what had happened to her. In her photo book, she found a picture of herself lying in a hospital bed with 2 arm casts. Kelly was holding a cake in front of her, which Michael was trying to eat with his entire face. It was her 12th birthday, Halloween. In the picture, she was smiling, but her eyes looked haunted. Harper absently rubbed both of her forearms. The cast had been removed 6 months ago, and the doctor had warned her of phantom pains in her injured areas. But she didn't have pain as much as the odd sensation that her cast was still in her arm. 2 badly fractured arms, a broken collarbone, several broken ribs, and no memory. Whatever had happened, Harper figured it must have been so bad that her mind had repressed the memories. Did she really want to remember them now? So if you would like to read this book or anything similar to it, please give us a call, and we'd be happy to set this and other titles aside. Happy Friday!